The shimmer of artificial starlight caught in Lyra Blackwood's dark hair as she stood before the quantum mirror, adjusting the ceremonial pins that held her diplomatic sash in place. The deep blue fabric, adorned with Earth's new unified emblem, draped elegantly across her formal attire, a subtle blend of traditional human fashion and adaptations to Astrian aesthetic sensibilities. "Your heart rate is elevated, Ambassador Blackwood," murmured Ambassador Harrison Reed, his weathered face reflected behind her. "But then again, I'd be more worried if it wasn't." Lyra allowed herself a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. 15 years of diplomatic training, Harrison, and nothing quite prepares you for being humanity's last hope. The observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Artemis offered a breathtaking view of the Astrian capital world, Luminara. Its crystalline spires seemed to pierce the very fabric of space, their iridescent surfaces refracting the light of 3 moons. Somewhere in that maze of impossible architecture sat the High Council, waiting to decide Earth's fate. "You're not just our last hope," Harrison said, moving to stand beside her. His artificial leg made a soft whirring sound, a reminder of the last failed negotiation with the Asterians 5 years ago. "You're our best hope." The Council may be logical to a fault, but they respect pattern recognition. Your work with the Centaurian crisis proved that humans can think beyond mere survival instincts. Lyra touched the small pendant at her throat, a gift from her late mother, one of the first human xenoanthropologists to study Astrian culture. The Centaurians were different. They still understood emotion, even if they expressed it differently. The Asterians. She trailed off, watching a patrol of crystalline ships glide past their vessel. "The Asterians feel deeply," Harrison corrected. "They've simply built a civilization on suppressing those feelings. Remember what your mother's research suggested, their art still holds echoes of their emotional past." A soft chime interrupted their conversation. The ship's AI announced, "Counselor Nixus of the Asterian High Council requests permission to board for preliminary discussions." Lyra's breath caught. Nixus, the youngest member of the council, and perhaps their most enigmatic. His appointment had caused ripples through the diplomatic community, as he occasionally displayed what other Asterians considered concerning traces of intuitive thinking. "Permission granted," Lyra responded, straightening her posture. "Please direct Counselor Nixus to the primary conference room." Harrison gripped her shoulder gently. "Remember what I taught you. Their logic can be their weakness, they're so focused on predictable patterns that they often miss the beautiful chaos of spontaneity." The walk to the conference room felt both eternal and far too short. When the doors slid open, Lyra's first impression of Nixus was one of contained power. Like all Asterians, his skin held a faint luminescence, but his was deeper, more opal than pearl. His formal robes seemed to capture and release light in impossible ways. "Ambassador Blackwood," he spoke, his voice carrying that characteristic Asterian harmonic quality. "Your reputation precedes you. The Council has studied your diplomatic history extensively." Lyra inclined her head in the precise angle of Asterian respect. "I'm honored by the Council's thoroughness, Counselor Nixus. Though I admit, I'm curious why you requested this preliminary meeting." Something flickered in Nixus's iridescent eyes, something that shouldn't exist in a being of pure logic. "Patterns, Ambassador. They are the foundation of our society. Yet in studying your species, I've noticed that humanity's greatest achievements often come from breaking them." Harrison shifted slightly beside her, but Lyra maintained her composure. "Perhaps, Counselor, that's because we see patterns differently. Where others might see a broken pattern, we see the beginning of a new one." Nixus moved to the observation window, his reflection overlaying the spectacular view of his homeworld. "The Council has already drafted the documentation for Earth's submission or destruction. They consider it a binary choice with a statistically probable outcome." "And what do you consider it, Counselor?" Lyra asked, taking a calculated risk by moving to stand beside him. He turned to her, and for a moment, Lyra saw something impossible, uncertainty in an Asterian's expression. "I consider it an opportunity to question whether our understanding of patterns is as complete as we believe." His gaze met hers directly. The preliminary session begins in 3 hours. I suggest you prepare to show us a pattern we've never seen before, Ambassador Blackwood. As Nixus left the conference room, Harrison let out a long breath. Well, that was unexpected. Lyra watched the counselor's retreating form, her mind racing with possibilities. No, Harrison. That was the first crack in their perfect logic. She touched her mother's pendant again, drawing strength from it. And tomorrow, we're going to turn that crack into a door. The Asterian High Council chamber was a marvel of crystalline architecture, its transparent walls refracting light in patterns that seemed to follow Lyra's movements. She stood at the center of the circular platform, surrounded by 12 towering seats occupied by beings who held Earth's fate in their hands. Your proposal is unprecedented, declared High Counselor Razix, his luminescent form pulsing with what Lyra had learned to recognize as mild agitation. A cultural exchange program of this magnitude has never been attempted with a species at your level of development. Lyra maintained her composure, though she could feel Harrison's supportive presence behind her. With respect, High Counselor, unprecedented doesn't mean illogical. Earth's artistic and cultural achievements have already influenced 3 other spacefaring civilizations. From his seat, Nixus leaned forward slightly. Ambassador Blackwood's argument has merit. The Centaurian archives show a 47% increase in creative problem-solving after their limited exposure to human literature. A new voice cut through the chamber. Creative chaos is still chaos. Counselor Merith rose from her seat, her pearl-white skin almost blinding in the chamber's light. The human ambassador speaks of culture, but I see calculation. Tell me, Ambassador Blackwood, how many contingency plans did your government prepare before sending you here? The question was a trap, and Lyra knew it. The truth would damn them, and a lie would be detected instantly by Asterian biosensors. She chose a third path. Counselor Merith, I would be disappointed if any species facing extinction didn't explore every possible avenue for survival. Lyra moved to the center of the chamber, her diplomatic sash catching the light. But I'm not here to present a contingency plan. I'm here because humanity has something unique to offer the Asterian collective. The chamber's security chief, Darian, stepped forward from his post. His crystalline armor reflected fragments of light across the floor. High Council, our analysis indicates the ambassador's vital signs suggest absolute conviction. Either she believes what she's saying, or I'm telling the truth. Lyra completed his sentence, earning a sharp look from several council members. Chief Darian, your people value patterns. Have you noticed that every species the collective has absorbed has brought technological or strategic advantages? But none has ever challenged your fundamental understanding of existence itself. Nixus's eyes met hers briefly, and she saw that same flicker of something more than logic. But it was Merith who spoke next, her voice carrying a hint of what might have been curiosity. Explain yourself, Ambassador. The Asterians have achieved near perfection in logical progression and technological advancement, Lyra continued, moving slowly around the chamber. But perfection can become stagnation. Humanity offers something different, we offer beautiful imperfection. We offer art that defies explanation, music that moves without reason, and love that transcends logic. The chamber fell silent. Harrison shifted behind her, and she could almost feel his tension. They had practiced this moment, but what came next would be entirely unscripted. I propose a year-long exchange, Lyra announced. Not just of knowledge or technology, but of experience. Let selected humans live among your people, and chosen Asterians among ours. Not as subjects for study, but as participants in each other's lives. Impossible, Merith declared. The risk of cultural contamination is exactly what we're counting on, Nixus interrupted, standing from his seat. Council members, consider, our recent surveys show a 3% increase in cognitive deviation among our younger population. They're asking questions about emotion, about alternative forms of expression. Perhaps this isn't a flaw to be corrected, but an evolution to be explored. Darian stepped closer to Lyra, his armor humming with contained energy. Ambassador, you should know that we've detected unusual communication patterns between Earth's orbital stations in the past week. Lyra's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. Chief Darien, did your analysis include the content of those communications, or merely their pattern? Pattern only, as per privacy protocols established in the preliminary agreement. Then you missed the context. Those communications were about art, specifically, a collaborative project between human and Centaurian artists, creating the first ever cross-species symphony. She pulled out a small holographic projector. With the Council's permission? After a moment's hesitation, Razix nodded. Lyra activated the device, and the chamber filled with swirling colors and harmonies that blended human orchestral music with the crystalline tones of Centaurian sound sculpture. The effect on the Council was immediate and visible. Several members shifted in their seats, their bioluminescence fluctuating in response to the unexpected sensory input. Nixus's expression was one of barely contained wonder. Meredith rose again, but her voice had lost some of its edge. This proves nothing except your species' ability to influence others. No, Lyra countered softly. It proves our ability to create something new together. Something that neither species could have created alone. She turned to face the entire Council. Isn't that worth exploring before you decide to eliminate us? As the symphony faded, Razix raised his hand for silence. We will consider your proposal, Ambassador Blackwood. But be warned, any sign of deception, any hint that this is merely a delay tactic, and our original judgment will be carried out immediately. Later, in the private chamber assigned to the Earth delegation, Harrison paced nervously. They'll be watching us closer than ever now. If they discover the true extent of the cultural changes already spreading through their younger population. Lyra watched Luminara's triple moons through the window. They're going to discover it eventually, Harrison. The question is whether we can help them see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. She touched her mother's pendant, remembering the look in Nixus's eyes during the symphony. And I think we just found our first real ally on the Council. The gardens of Luminara's diplomatic quarter defied traditional understanding of the word. Instead of organic plants, crystalline formations grew in geometric patterns, their surfaces shifting with the movement of artificial light beneath them. Lyra walked these paths alone, her fingers trailing along the cool surfaces of what the Asterians called living architecture. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice belonged to Yarrick Thorne, Earth's newly arrived cultural attaché. His presence here was both a help and a complication. Though I must say, Ambassador, I expected more resistance to the exchange program. The Council's acceptance seems convenient. Lyra kept her expression neutral. The Asterians value efficiency, Yarrick. Once they saw the logical benefits of cultural exchange. Logic? He laughed softly. I've reviewed the surveillance feeds from the Council chamber. Counselor Nixus's intervention wasn't based on logic. He's compromised, and you know it. Before Lyra could respond, a familiar harmonic voice interrupted them. Ambassador Blackwood, Cultural Attaché Thorne. Nixus emerged from behind a crystalline formation, his formal robes replaced by simpler attire. I hope I'm not interrupting a sensitive discussion. Yarrick bowed with perfect precision. Not at all, Counselor. I was just expressing my appreciation for how smoothly the negotiations are progressing. Indeed. Nixus's iridescent eyes fixed on Lyra. Ambassador, the Council requests your presence for a private session. Now, if possible. Lyra nodded to Yarrick, who took the dismissal with practiced grace. As he departed, she turned to Nixus. Private sessions aren't standard protocol. Nothing about this situation is standard protocol. Nixus gestured for her to walk with him. The Council is divided. Meredith has presented evidence suggesting that human cultural influence has already begun affecting our youth through unauthorized channels. Lyra's heart raced, but she kept her pace steady. Is that necessarily a negative development? That depends on one's perspective. Nixis stopped beside a formation that pulsed with deep blue light. Some see it as contamination. Others see it as evolution. The question is, what do you see it as, Lyra? The use of her first name wasn't lost on her. I see it as inevitable, she answered honestly. Species change, Nixis. They adapt, they grow. Even the Asterians must have been different once. We were. His voice carried a new tone, something almost wistful. Before the great logic, our history speaks of a time of chaos, of passion, of... He trailed off, his bioluminescence flickering slightly. Of feeling, Lyra completed softly. She moved closer, noting how the crystal formations around them seemed to respond to their proximity, creating intricate patterns of light. The council chamber has been prepared, he said abruptly, but didn't move away. They're waiting. The walk to the chamber was filled with unspoken words. Inside, Lyra found not the full council, but a select few, Razix, Merith, and 2 others she didn't recognize. Chief Darien stood guard, his crystalline armor somehow more imposing in the intimate setting. Ambassador Blackwood, Razix began without preamble, we have intercepted concerning communications from your cultural attaché Thorn. He reports directly to a faction on Earth that opposes our arrangement. Lyra's diplomatic training kicked in. All major decisions face opposition, High Counselor. That's the nature of democratic society. The nature of chaos, Merith corrected. But more concerning is his observation about Counselor Nixis's emotional compromise. Nixis stepped forward. My judgment remains clear, Counselor Merith. I simply possess a broader perspective on the potential benefits of this exchange. Show her, Merith commanded. Darien activated a holographic display. Images filled the chamber, young Asterians creating art that defied their traditional patterns, gatherings where music was played that carried emotional resonance, and most damning, secret meetings where Asterians practiced expressing feelings. This infection spreads deeper than we feared, Merith declared. And it began long before Ambassador Blackwood's arrival. The question is, how long has Earth been deliberately contaminating our culture? We haven't been, Lyra stated firmly. But I won't deny that human culture has influenced yours. Art, music, emotion, they're contagious because they're fundamental to conscious experience. Even the most logical beings can't help but respond to beauty. An interesting choice of words, Razix observed. Contagious. Like a disease. Or like growth, Nixis countered. High Counselor, I move to share something with the ambassador. Something from before the great logic. The chamber fell silent. Even Merith seemed shocked. Granted, Razix said after a long moment. But understand the consequences, Counselor Nixis. Nixis approached Lyra, removing something from his robes, a small crystalline structure that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. This was created by my ancestor, before our society chose logic over emotion. It's called a heart stone. It responds to genuine feeling. As he placed it in her hands, the crystal blazed with color, not the controlled patterns of Asterian technology, but wild, swirling hues that filled the chamber with unprecedented light. Merith stood sharply. This proves nothing except the human capacity for emotional manipulation. No, Razix said quietly. The heart stone cannot be deceived. It responds only to true emotion. He turned to Lyra. Ambassador, it seems we have all been operating under incomplete information. The question now is, what do we do with this truth? Lyra held the glowing crystal, aware of Nixis's proximity, of the weight of history in her hands. We embrace it, she said. Not as a replacement for logic, but as its complement. Your society chose logic to prevent chaos, but in doing so, you may have lost something essential. Let us help you find a balance. And if we refuse? Merith challenged. Then you'll still have to face the change that's already begun, Lyra replied. The only question is whether you'll face it with allies or alone. As the crystal's light played across their faces, Lyra saw something she never expected: uncertainty in Razix's eyes, fear in Meritha's, and in Nixus's, something that the great logic had tried to erase centuries ago. Hope. The encrypted message from Harrison arrived at midnight: Thorn has moved. Emergency session called. Trust no one. Lyra stood in her quarters, the heartstone pulsing faintly in her hands. Its light had grown dimmer since the council meeting, as if reflecting the growing tension in Luminara's crystalline towers. A soft chime announced an unexpected visitor. Chief Darien stood at her door, his armor darkened to stealth mode. Ambassador, we don't have much time. The traditionalist faction is making its move. Explain, Lyra demanded, quickly securing the Heartstone. Counselor Merith has presented evidence to the High Council suggesting that Earth's cultural contamination was deliberate, a long-term strategy to destabilize Asturian society. Darien's usually stoic face showed concern. They're using Thorn's communications as proof. Yarrick, Lyra breathed. He's been playing both sides. More than that, came Nixus's voice as he emerged from the shadows of the corridor. He's been working with extremists from both our societies. Those who believe that any change to the established order must be prevented at all costs. Lyra let them both in, engaging her quarters' privacy protocols. The timing's too perfect. They waited until the exchange program was about to begin. Because that's when we're most vulnerable, Darien agreed. The first group of human artists and scholars arrives tomorrow. If anything happens to them, Earth would blame the Asturians, Lyra finished. And the traditionalists would have their excuse to end all contact. Nixus moved closer, his bioluminescence dimmed to barely a glow. There's more. We've discovered that certain elements in Earth's military have been hoping for this outcome. They believe a diplomatic failure would justify their more aggressive solutions. Harrison, Lyra suddenly remembered. Where is he? Safe, Darien assured her. But under surveillance. They're watching everyone now. The Heartstone pulsed suddenly, its light strengthening. Nixus stared at it, then at Lyra. It's responding to something. Our emotions, perhaps, or it's warning us, Lyra suggested. Your ancestors created it to guide you, didn't they? Before the great logic. Before Nixus could respond, the building's security system chimed. Emergency Council session commencing in 30 minutes. All diplomatic personnel are required to attend. It's a trap, Darien stated flatly. They'll use the session to make their accusations public. Lyra touched her mother's pendant, thinking quickly. Then we'll spring it first. Chief Darien, can you access the Council's emergency broadcast system? Yes, but do it. Nixus, I need you to help me reach the younger Asturians, the ones already embracing change. And I need the Heartstone. For a moment, both Asturians stood silent. Then Nixus spoke softly, what you're suggesting is technically treason. No, Lyra countered. It's evolution. The Celestial Hall had never seen anything like this. As Merith rose to make her accusations, the chamber's crystal walls suddenly blazed with light, not the controlled patterns of Asturian technology, but the wild, emotional pulses of the Heartstone, amplified through the building's systems. What is the meaning of this? Razix demanded, rising from his seat. Lyra stood in the center of the chamber, the Heartstone held high. The meaning, High Counselor, is truth. Not the careful, constructed truth of pure logic, but the messy, complicated truth of reality. Around the chamber, hundreds of young Asturians had gathered, students, artists, and citizens who had already begun embracing change. They stood silent, their own bioluminescence pulsing in harmony with the Heartstone. This is an outrage. Merith began, but Nixus cut her off. No, what's outrageous is the conspiracy you and Attaché Thorn engineered. Nixus activated a holographic display, showing intercepted communications between Merith, Thorn, and various conspirators. You were so focused on preventing change that you were willing to risk war. Yarrick Thorne, standing with the Earth delegation, tried to move toward the exit but found himself blocked by Harrison and several loyal security officers. The Heartstone shows us what we've forgotten, Lyra continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Your ancestors understood that logic and emotion aren't enemies, they're two halves of a greater whole. Like your people and mine. The stone's light grew stronger, and something unprecedented happened. The younger Asterians began to sing. Not the mathematical harmonics of traditional Asterian music, but something new, a blend of their crystalline tones with human melody. Razix stood transfixed. This is from before the great logic. How do they know this song? Because it never left us, Nixus answered. We buried it under logic and order, but it remained in our art, our architecture, our very beings. Ambassador Blackwood didn't bring chaos to our society, she helped us rediscover our own truth. Meritha's facade finally cracked. You don't understand what you're risking. Our ancestors chose logic because emotion nearly destroyed us. No, came a new voice. An elderly Asterian stepped forward, Professor Jackson, keeper of the historical archives. Our ancestors chose logic because they feared the power of balance. The Heartstone wasn't just a tool for feeling, it was a symbol of harmony between logic and emotion. The chamber had become a symphony of light and sound. Human diplomats stood alongside Asterian youth, their differences forgotten in the shared moment of discovery. Lyra looked at Razix. High Counselor, you asked what we should do with the truth. Here's my answer, we build something new. Not human, not Asterian, but a future that takes the best of both. Harrison stepped forward, supporting himself on his cane. Earth doesn't want to change who you are. We want to help you remember who you've always been. The Heartstone's light touched every face in the chamber, revealing what the great logic had hidden, the subtle play of emotions beneath the surface of Asterian control. Fear, hope, wonder, and possibility. Razix was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, his own bioluminescence began to pulse in harmony with the stone. Perhaps, he said quietly, it is time for the next great evolution of our people. He turned to Lyra. Ambassador Blackwood, your exchange program is approved, but with a modification. Instead of a temporary exchange, I propose a permanent cooperation. A new council, comprised of both our peoples, to guide us through this transformation. Meritha and her conspirators were led away by Darien security forces. Yarrick Thorne would face justice on Earth. But these seemed like small details compared to the magnitude of what was happening in the chamber. As the crowd began to disperse, Nixus approached Lyra. You knew the Heartstone would resonate with the crystal architecture. I hoped, she corrected, smiling. Sometimes hope is more powerful than certainty. He touched the stone, his fingers brushing hers. We have much to learn from each other. That's what makes it beautiful, Lyra replied, watching as human and Asterian alike began to mingle, share, and create something new together. The light of 3 moons filtered through the crystal walls, creating patterns that no one, not logic, not emotion, not human, not Asterian, could have designed alone. And in that light, 2 civilizations began to write their shared future, one heartbeat at a time.